everybody up on YouTube land and Earth Station One folks on audio. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to another episode, and we've got a good one for you this week. We're joined by artist and writer Ron Randall. Welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on the show.
It is great, and thank you for joining us because I know this is right after a big con for you. So So it's going to be a fun one, and so if you're a little punch drunk, this is perfect for you to be on the show then, because
That's right.
we'll take full advantage of it. Don't worry.
That's right. Yeah.
So, folks, you never know what he's going to come up with answers tonight, and we definitely would love to hear from you guys tonight. Feedback at Earth Station One is definitely the way for you to get in touch with us. Of course, Mr. Mike is here. You ready to take it away, sir?
I am. Howdy, Ron. Let's for those people who don't know who you are, real quick, like tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm a comic book writer and artist. I've done a lot of work. I've been working in the business since the early 1980s. Got started at DC, did some work there, did a little bit of work for Marvel as well. Then moved back across the country to Oregon, which is where I'm from. It happened to be pretty much the exact summer that Dark Horse, as well as a lot of other indie, comic companies, were just getting fired up and up to speed then. Dark Horse is looking for some guys who had a bit of a track record working for the bigs and wanted to get some people like that working for their company. So I wound up hooking up with them and created Trekker, sort of my dream project, not sort of, my dream project. Not trying to be cute or coy here. It's what I'm passionate about doing. And did some other work for Dark Horse as well. I drew some Predator miniseries for them, did some work for Star Wars, things like that. So been at it a long time and still kicking strong.
Let's go. Let's start from the beginning then. Let's go back to, like, when did you first have an interest in comics? Was it from a very early age?
It was, yeah. It bit pretty early and pretty deep with me. I mean, when I was a little kid, because my hair color will let you know I've been around for a while. But when I was a little kid, comic books were pretty much ubiquitous. You'd go into a convenience store, corner market, whatever, and there'd be the stack of candy bars, right? And there'd be the little balsa wood flyers, and there'd be the comic books. And I just sort of took them for granted, like a kid takes everything for granted. But in second grade, so it's pretty early on, I had a classmate who became my best friend. And one time I went over to his house to hang around and stuff. And he had in the basement on this big table these stacks of comic books. And like I said, I read comic books. I knew about them. I knew to read them, but his were sorted by creators. He had like some Fantastic Fours that were by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and he had Uncle Scrooge by Carl Barks. And it may sound whatever, it is overly simplistic, but like I said, I just sort of took it for granted. They just appeared, right? But when I was talking with this guy, Kurt Thayer was his name, the light bulb went off in my head, and I said, people do that for a living. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it hit me like that when it did. I was like, what, maybe like 7, 8 years old or something like that, which is ridiculously young for this sort of thing. Actually, we met in second grade. It might have been a couple years later before the label went off. But anyway, I was still pretty young. So by my grade school years, I was starting to, draw my own characters and make up stories about them and stuff like that. So it bit hard. But back then, like I said, I was a little kid. I was growing up in Portland, Oregon. The idea about being a professional comic book artist was like saying you wanted to be, an astronaut or something. It is so remote. I never thought there was a chance that I could do that, because the entire comic book industry then was in the middle of Manhattan Island, which is like on the other side of the world, So it was just like one of those things you dream about. Like I dreamt about being a fighter pilot, something like that. But one little step at a time, things broke in such a way that I wound up living in New Jersey, and I went to the Joe Kubert School right when it was sort of starting up. Joe had been one of the artists that I discovered in my youth of reading comic books. And I mean, I don't think you could read a Joe Kubert comic without getting sucked into that story that he was telling you, and it was just transporting. So when I heard that he was starting up a school, I said, this might be a way I could actually do this. So
Mhm.
I applied, got in. One morning, I wound up standing in the middle of New Jersey and said, "I guess I'm serious about this. This might really happen." So after going to the Kubert School, it was for the 2 years. It was a 2-year program first. Now it's a 3-year program. But I went there, met some great classmates who have gone on to have pretty great careers in comics. Was able to use that and working under Joe's tutelage after the school ended, to get some short stories at DC Comics that led to larger projects. So that's kind of my origin story, I guess.
As you were developing your own artistic style, would you say are your top influences?
That's, I mean, it's a real potpourri. The sort of the most conscious ones, the ones that I sort of consciously most aspire to, are people like Al Williamson and Hal Foster, and to sort of a lesser extent in a way, Joe Kubert, who has a profound influence on me in my approach to storytelling, my sense of story structure, the sense of trying to create drama and stuff. Although his actual drawing style is something I can't touch. With Joe, it's just too intuitive and stuff. My own temperamental leanings are more towards people like I mentioned, Al Williamson, Foster, Wally Wood, people whose work is sort of very balanced and sort of classical, in its, and Hal Foster, just as classical as it gets. Those guys bit me fairly young when I got into adventure comic series like Prince Valiant, like Flash Gordon, and the EC science fiction comics of the 50s. So those influences are all there. But then underneath that, there's also, when I was a kid growing up, there's no denying, I looked at Jack Kirby comics. You can't look at Jack Kirby comics and not want to have some of that pizzazz in your work. John Byrne's run on X-Men. I mean, Neil Adams. There's a bunch of guys, but I'd say the two poles that I sort of go between is sort of that romantic classicism of somebody like Al Williamson with all that grace and elegance of his art, and then to the extent that I can get at the drama and energy of Joe's work. So somewhere between those two poles, that's kind of where I land.
I noticed that when I'm a DC fanboy, and I noticed when you did a lot of your work for DC is not superhero work. You did a lot of titles like war titles like Sergeant Rock and Unknown Soldier, Warlord, I think, right?
Yeah.
And Swamp Thing, I guess, would be the closest. I mean, was that something that you chose, or you just didn't happen to have those opportunities to work on like Batman or Justice League or anything?
Right. Well, no, I was not one of those guys who could pick his shots. I couldn't go up to the DC people and tell them what book I wanted to draw, right? So it was the jobs that I was offered. Some of that was, I think it was because, like I say, my influences, the stuff I carried around inside me that was coming out in my work probably seemed more suitable towards some of those other genre titles. Also, I was getting into the business at the time that Dick Giordano was I don't remember his title, was managing editor, or he was the head guy in the editorial department at DC Comics. And Dick Giordano, legendary comic book creator, inked Neil Adams classic runs on a lot of the Green Lantern, Green Arrow stuff and Batman stuff. So everybody knows Dick from those superhero jobs that he did. But here's a little known fact, maybe for people, about Dick Giordano: he didn't really like superheroes. Dick's favorite comics were detective stories, westerns, romance comics. So when he was the managing editor of DC, he made a very conscious effort to try to expand the types of stories that we could do in comics. So I got to do some science fiction things, and they did Air Accent of Thunder, which is sort of like their version of a Conan sort of story. And I want to be the artist on that. So in other words, I think I got a lot of those non-superhero jobs because that's just kind of that my art style sort of lent itself to those things. And for a while, there were those kind of targets of opportunity in the business. In the end, you can't be in this business forever and not draw superheroes. It seems hardly, at least back then. So I did wind up having a run on Justice League years later. But yeah, I at one point, I even then in like the late 1980s, I was saying, this is really weird. This is an industry that's like, I don't know what the percentage is, 75, 80% of the books out there are straight down the middle of the road superhero comic books. And I've somehow avoided that train. I get all these other, which fit my style better, but of course they didn't have the visibility that a run on, Spider-Man or something would have had. But for better or worse, that wasn't the track I seemed to be running on.
Well, one thing that did impress me is that you were part of that massively influential Alan Moore Swamp Thing run.
Oh.
And I have to ask, how was it working with Alan Moore?
Well, it was it was as great as you probably think it might have been. That came. I was just in the right place at the right time. When I at the Kubert School, one of my classmates, the guy that sat right next to me, was John Toddleben. And you want to talk about being intimidated by a guy who just had incredible natural talent and ability. An upperclassman, the guy in the year above me, was Steve Bissett. So we would hang out. There's a pretty tight group at the Kubert School. It's a bunch of nerds. We all want to get into comics together. So we knew each other and hung out together. And actually, before Steve and John worked with Moore on Swamp Thing, another upperclassmate, Tom Yates, was drawing the Swamp Thing book written by Marty Pasco at the time. And Tom kind of had to carry a lot of heavy water, as they might say, because he had these stories that were not as mind-blowing as what Moore would come on to do. But I first helped Tom out with some backgrounds and stuff on Swamp Thing. So that sort of had me in the world a little bit. And then when Alan, Steve, and John came on board, Karen Berger was the editor. She was working with them, and she knew that I'd been to the Kubert School. I'd see her in the offices of DC Comics, and sometimes when the book would be in a little bit of deadline trouble and they needed 5 pages of fill-in pencils or inks, I could sort of switch hit and sort of get into Steve's mode close enough that I wouldn't damage the storytelling too much, and then John would ink it all, of course, and it would look like a great Swamp Thing story. And some issues, I would be filling in for a few pages of inks, just trying to get as close to Toddleben's elegant, amazing rendering. Again, to just keep those pages within the ballpark of what those guys were doing on the book. And one time I got to draw a solo Swamp Thing story that I got to pencil and ink off of Alan's script, and it was an incredible experience. Moore's scripts were full of panel description and details and stuff, and that can be deadly in a comic script. If you're the writer or the artist and you're reading a script and it's all this direction telling you what to draw that the writer feels is essential to have in each panel, it often feels like you're slowly having a straitjacket lowered over your body, because you'll read the first sentence in the description and you'll think, that would be a great image, I can do that. And then you read the second and it's, I can't do that because he needs this too. So that's the best option off the table. Then you read again, nope. But it was exactly the opposite with the way Alan's script descriptions went, at least in my experience. He would say something like, this is what happens in the panel. But then he would say things like, you could have things like this, and you could have things like that. Or if you have a better idea, really, we're just going for this kind of impression, this type of impression. Like, remember that moment in the Psycho movie when there's a shadow going up the stairwell and you hear this creepy music in the background? That's what we're after. So his descriptions were impressionistic because he had a great visual sense and a great dramatic sense. So he was just trying to sort of get inside the story and let you feel what he was feeling the story needed. And as far as the specifics, he would make suggestions, sometimes for camera angles or whatever, but it was always in a very conversational tone in the script, because it's just him telling you a great story. And it inspired me to say, what can I add to this? A lot of times I didn't have anything better than his suggestions. Sometimes I thought of another idea. So it felt very collaborative, and just a great writer. And I bumped into one time at the halls of a DC. He happened to be, in the States. And at that time,
he's a pretty imposing figure, right?
Well, but at the time, he was very high. He was like, "Oh, Ron, it's so great to see you. Thanks so much for the work you're doing on Swamp Thing." It's just like, it was just kind of, this guy is saying this to me. It was really kind of surreal. It was great. It was a great moment.
Yeah, very cool. Anything else you'd like to point out about your time with DC? As far as nice memories or a story that you're particularly proud of?
Maybe I'll try to not take this too long with this, but when I was trying to get in, this is a time when DC there was like this thing called the DC implosion. So DC was making a lot of comic books, and then the economy had a downturn, and so DC really cut back their line. So a lot of guys who were just starting out, like me, had been getting a short story here, a little bit of work there, and then all of a sudden it got cut off. And that lasted for a while. But then gradually, a few of my buddies started to get another short story. Like it's like the ice was starting to thaw a little bit. And one time, my friend Jan Dursema, who went on to have a pretty damn good career, and she was also one of my classmates at the Kubert School, and she was going into DC because she was doing I forget now what it was, but she was doing a job for them. And I said, hey, I just finished doing this samurai backup story for Joe on Sergeant Rock, and I thought that's some of my best stuff. Could you take it up there in the office with you and just make good quality photocopies for me? I was too broke to get photocopies that I had to pay for. Anyway, so she was up there, and she was at the photocopy machine, copying some of her own stuff and my story. And then she got called away to have a conversation with somebody. My photocopy, my art was left on the machine, and a then editor named Lori Sutton was walking by, saw my art there, and said, "Oh, this looks like it might fit this story this backup story I'm trying to get going in the back of Warlord." So she found Jan and said, "Oh, who is this guy?" And so that's how I got started doing what came to be my first sort of steady ongoing job at DC Comics, which is working on a thing called The Barren Earth, which is a backup in Warlord. And it's just one of those stories about breaks, how you get a break in comics. You never know where it's going to come from. You just try to put yourself in positions where people can see your work that might be able to give you a leg up and stuff like that. It's just a wacky, fluky story, but it really led to good things.
I always like hearing about how people got in the different ways in the door, because it's always, like you said, it's always different. There's no set path.
There's no set path.
When did you get the itch to do something like a creator owned?
That was when I moved back here to Oregon. After I'd been in Jersey for about a total of 8 years, the Kubert School years, and then working in the, getting things going slowly, gradually with DC and Marvel, I got to the point where I said, okay, I think I've got enough connections and relationships built here that I can probably head back home, because Oregon was always home to me, and work long distance. Now, this is before there was an internet. I mean, fax machines and FedEx were just coming in. So it still felt very much like it was 3,000 miles away from everything. So it was kind of a risk, but I did that. And again, it's another one of those crazy flukes of timing. I moved back to Oregon just as Dark Horse was getting going. And I was tabling at a local little comic book show with some of my original art pages from some of the stuff I'd done for DC. And these two very tall young guys came up to my table and introduced themselves, and saying that they were going to be starting, or they were just starting, a little comic book company right here in my own hometown of Portland, Oregon. Who would have thought it, And they were their names were Mike Richardson and Randy Stradley, the publisher of Dark Horse Comics and the editor at the time. He was one of the 3 or 4 guys in the company.
The Twin Towers, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. Those were 2 tall young gentlemen. Very charming, very nice guys. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm drawing the regular monthly Warlord comics at DC Comics, which is kind of like back then, you were doing a regular monthly book. You were kind of where you wanted to be, right? Why would I leave that to go work for these guys? Who knew what was going to happen with, independent black and white comics or a company like Dark Horse? But one of them leaned over the table to me, and I don't remember which one it was. And they just said, "Ron, if you come and work for us, we will pay you your rate, and you can do whatever you want. If you want to write your own stories, great. If you want us to find a writer to work with you." And I thought to myself, I'll never hear this sentence again in my life. And I was right. So up until then, I hadn't really thought, gee, I'll make my own comic book series in anything like a serious way. But I realized these guys are sort of opening that door for me. And to make it worth the taking the risk of leaving the steady gig for DC Comics, I had a couple of young children at the time, so I needed to, be bringing in some cash. But to make it worth the time, the risk, I should say, I said, I better come up with my dream project. And I thought about that and what I wanted it to be. And the answer I came up with was Trekker. I designed the character, came up with the worldview. I mean, I wanted to do science fiction because, as you could probably hear from some of those influences I named earlier, I love science fiction in comics. I love science fiction novels like Dune and the Asimov trilogy. Flash Gordon in the comic strips. Star Wars had come out. Blade Runner had come out by then. There were just a lot of different kinds of science fiction, and it just seemed to open my imagination in a lot of different ways. And there weren't that many opportunities to do that in comics then. Also, that Barren Earth backup that I did in Warlord that I mentioned was written by a guy named Gary Cohn. And Gary's idea was a science fiction series that was more like an Edgar Rice Burroughs-y sort of thing, but there was a female lead character in it. And I just really enjoyed that. It was so cool to see the woman character not just being the sidekick or the romantic interest, but in that spearheading an action adventure comic. There were things that could happen with the emotional range you could tell and stuff. It was just different. It felt fresh and different. So that's what I put all that stuff together in my own version of what this could be. And I thought, if she's a bounty hunter, a character that could roam around and go into different situations, scenarios, confront different sorts of bounties you're trying to collect, that gives the story a lot of sense of variety and motion. So that was basically what I came up with and pitched to Dark Horse. And what they should have probably said was, Ron, this is a very cute idea. We don't know how to sell a comic book like this. But they were also young and sort of, I guess I'd say, enthusiastic and stuff. And they just said, that sounds great, do it. And so then I had to figure out how to do it. And I've been trying to figure it out ever since.
Well, you've had great success with Mercy. Mercy St. Clair, the main character in Trekker. I was going to ask you what the influence is, the origin of where the Trekker idea came from. But obviously, yes, from reading it myself, I can see all that. I can see, especially the early days where she's on, I think it's Earth, right? But that's much more of a Blade Runner type, like sort of environment. And then now it's more adventure, like Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers kind of stuff, I think, which is really and it works. She's a character that you can do a lot of different things with. She's got a lot of, so yeah, let's talk, so she's introduced, you said that, so was it kind of a rough start for her at Dark Horse?
No, it was like a fast start for her. What happened was I thought, their flagship book was, I guess, Dark Horse Presents,
yes,
where there was an anthology book with a series of short stories, and that was great because that meant I could the first appearance of Trekker was an 8-page story in Dark Horse Presents, and I knew so we were serializing her first full-length story over those 3 8-page chapters, and that I was a pretty young writer. I'd only written a few short stories in the back of Sergeant Rock comics professionally at the time, so when I came up with the idea for Trekker, part of it was that it would start small. It would start small scale, very sort of black and white, 2-dimensional character, the way she views the world. And the series is about her growing internally, discovering things about herself that the reader sees long before she does, and also growing to step out into a larger role and sort of becoming a character of destiny. So I had that sort of real expansive, grandiose sci-fi thing that I was aspiring to get. And I knew that I didn't have the writing chops to pull that off right from the very beginning. So I wanted to start with small bites. And so in that first story, I'd plant little seeds, references to an organization that's resisting the powers that be out in the stars and things like that. And I thought, I don't have all the details figured out on that yet because Dark Horse wanted me to get this story going, pretty quickly. But I wanted to plant some seeds and figure I'll get that stuff figured out later. So she did 3 short stories in Dark Horse Presents, and then right away they wanted to turn it into a regular ongoing series. So then I had to dive in head first with that. So some of it was not making it up, but sort of fleshing it out and developing it more as I went along. So it kind of got off to a breakneck start there. And so she had her own series at Dark Horse for a while. It was bi-monthly because I was writing it, penciling it, inking it, all that sort of stuff. So it's a big load. But then they got to a point where it just, the black and white market wasn't continuing to be as robust. And so Trekker, they wasn't able to bring in the numbers that they could afford to pay me to keep doing it on an ongoing basis at that rate. They said, we'd like to keep doing Trekker, but can you cut down we'd have to cut back on the price. And I said, I got a young family, got mouths to feed. So then I had to just put Trekker on on more like an intermittent basis and
Mhm.
take on other jobs for DC or Marvel to make more money. So I would do a story for a Trekker, more stories in Dark Horse Presents, or a standalone story like that. That was just more sporadic in the way that they would appear, which is a terrible way to try to build an audience. It's almost like playing hide and seek with your audience. So after a long protracted period of that, I finally just said, this isn't doing anybody any good. It's not serving the readers. It's not serving the series. It's not giving it a chance to really find an audience that needs. I feel for a book like Trekker that needs like a steady, consistent, publishing basis of some sort. So that's what I'm doing with it now through the Kickstarters that I've been doing for the last several years.
Yeah. When did you get the, so like you said, you had she was on a break. Did you feel like, I'm just going to put her on hold until I can, tell her story? Or was it something that just went in the filing cabinet and then you brought her back out fairly recently, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was definitely, I always knew that I wanted to get back to tell the
Gotcha.
rest of the story.
Nice.
What I always say that in 1999, I said, I'm putting it on hiatus. And I will get back to telling the rest of these stories when I can find a way to do that, to get the stories to come out on a regular, sustained, consistent, sort of predictable, scheduled basis, something like that. And then skip ahead to whatever, about 2011. Suddenly, Ron realizes there's an internet and there are web comics. I mean, I knew these things, but I suddenly realized, or I finally figured out that I've got all the original Trekker art stacked in my closet because I never sold any of the Trekker originals. It's just too important to me. It's too personal.
Okay, that's cool.
So I just sort of scanned those in and had some interns at our studio scan them in for me, and then I started posting them as a web comic. And the crucial thing that I did was I said, by the time I finish posting all of the existing Trekker stories, which is like 300 or so pages, I will have the next story ready to start posting here. So I subjected myself to the possibility of public humiliation if I didn't follow through on my word. And that gave me the motivation, I guess, to get back to that. And luckily at the same time, again, it's more timing stuff. It's so weird. But Dark Horse is just beginning to revive their Dark Horse Presents book. And I bumped into the guys at a comic shop where they were doing a little event about that. And Mike said, gee, it'd be great to get Trekker back into some Dark Horse Presents stories. And I said, I would love to get back to doing, because I knew when I made the web comic that was the first step. I needed to get Trekker back into print because that's the way these stories are best enjoyed as far as I'm concerned. That's how I envision them being experienced. So, and I thought and I didn't know how I was going to get it back into print. I didn't know if Dark Horse would want to do it or because the publishing world had changed a lot in those 12 years. But it turned out Mike was interested. So I said, I'd like to do that, but I don't want to just I'm not dallying or dabbling this time. I'm not effing around. I'm back here to stay. I'm not going to have Trekker disappear again. And he said, well, let's talk about that. So we met and we figured out a plan and a strategy. And so we got Trekker back into Dark Horse Presents. Then we did an omnibus collection to gather all of her black and white stories and stuff. And we put that out. And then I did 2 new Trekker stories that were fresh ones in those years, 2011, 12, 13, around there. But again, it was just after a little while, I was like, oh, we'll do one, and then we'll see how this does, and then we'll find a place in the schedule to put out another Trekker book. And I could see, I don't blame Dark Horse. They were great to work with creatively and everything, but Mike was running his company. He's got his publishing needs and requirements and a bottom line and all that sort of stuff. And they just weren't matching up with what I wanted for Trekker. I could see it's going to be an issue will come out, and then at some indeterminate interval, another story will come out, and that just wasn't working well for me. So sort of in an act of desperation, I said, if I really want to try to get this thing to come out on a schedule that I think serves the series and the readers well, and lets me get these stories told before I'm dead, because I have quite a few I know where the story is going, and it's going to take a while to get there. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to try Kickstarter, which was just coming alive or was growing into its the presence that it has now on the landscape. And so that was a nerve-wracking step to take. Sort of overwhelming. Kickstarter is a great machine, or what do you want to call it, a great platform. but it's a huge learning curve, or several learning curves, that I had to climb, going from being the guy that wrote and drew some stories to the guy that, crafted campaigns and sort of have to become a self-publisher and wearing all those hats. It's a lot. It's a lot to do, but but it's worked out pretty well so far.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think your Kickstarter story is one of the most successful ones I can think of. I love the fact that you're able to produce this work of your own. And let me give credit to, like, what a great environment that Dark Horse, Mike Richardson and them made a Dark
Yeah,
Horse, so that you created something and you still got to take it with you. Like it
yeah,
was yours.
yeah. That was that was such a great thing about Dark Horse. It was just a small group of guys that wanted to make comic books that they really liked. They were fans of comic books and fans of certain creators. So when Chris Warner wanted to do a book called Black Cross, that's his. Paul Chadwick created Concrete, that's his. They owned these things. Now Dark Horse has generated some properties that are company owned or co-owned with the artistic and writing creative team too. I don't know all about all that stuff, but in those early days, some of us just we were given our creative head, and we were given the ownership of that stuff, and it's just phenomenal. Like I said, it was so much right place, right time for me, and so much we benefited from the fact that Mike Richardson is a huge comic book geek, in the
Yeah.
best possible term.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so and it was really nice because I think a couple years ago, it allowed you to publish the like omnibus
Right.
with like the Dark Horse stories, the early Dark Horse stories, all collected in one big massive hardcover.
Yeah. Oh, I have a visual aid. This is the book here, and
I
it's
I have
that
that
thick.
somewhere back there.
Yeah, it's like 4 pounds and 4 ounces. It's a big book, but it's all, yeah, we took all
The black and whites, and you colored
all,
them, yeah.
yeah, I took all, because and the reason I did this, I had done about 3 campaigns already. So I would be showing up at conventions, and I'd have some of the Trekker books there, the ones that I'd done on Kickstarter. But meantime, the books that Dark Horse had put out, that omnibus of where they collected the black and whites, and a couple new trade paperbacks, those were all out of print.
Yeah.
So it'd be at a
Yeah.
comic book store, and the first thing a lot of people, if there's somebody's new to Trekker, they'll come up, and the natural question to ask is, which one's the first one?
Yeah.
And I would have to answer them, in all honesty, you can't get it. I mean, unless you like go look for it on Etsy, or go on a scavenger hunt. It's not. I don't have to sell. The Dark Horse warehouse is out of them. I sold all that I could get, and that's a terrible. It's a terrible thing to say to somebody who's trying to get. They want to get turned on to your comic,
And collectors want to start, like, readers want to
Yeah.
start with the first issue, no matter how bumpy or bad it might be. Like, it's like, oh, it's pretty rough in the beginning. No, but they want to start there. But the good
Right,
stuff, the
so
new stuff is better.
yeah, and also, I will say that it's really important to me that every single of the trade paperbacks or whatever, they should work as a self-contained standalone adventure.
Yes.
Each
Yes.
character story introduces the characters and the world, sets up an adventure, takes you through it, and resolves it in the pages of that one volume. But when you put them all together, that's when you see this arc of Mercy's life journey, the gradual evolution of her as a human being, and the world expanding and becoming more complicated. So yeah, I wanted to work on both of those levels. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of readers, they want to start. I'm that way. If I discover a musician that I like with their 4th album, I go back and get them all, because I want to trace. And some of them can be kind of clunky, and there's bumpy ones there, but I like the whole picture. So I needed to get all those stories back into print, and I thought, well, they've already appeared in the past as floppies and as trade paperbacks, and Dark Horse did the little black and white collection. So how can I bring them back in a format that that will make their presentation consistent with the new stories, which are all in color, and be a format we haven't seen before? And I was trying to think, should it be a series of trade paperbacks or whatever? And I was having a beer with my buddy Carl Kiesel, who's a pretty damn good Kickstarter creator and a phenomenal comic books maker himself. And he was saying, you need to do some hardbacks, Ron. Carl is much more of a visionary thinker like that than I am, because I thought hardback, but he was right. He says, people really like that really that really deluxe sort of packaging. So that's what I did. And so this first vol, it's the Complete Journey Volume 1, and that has all those old all the out of print stories that I'd done from Dark Horse, everything I did from 1987 through like 2012 or 13 or whatever. That's all. It's like 528 pages long. There's some extra features. It's got like spot gloss on the cover and a ribbon bookmark. So because the Kickstarter campaign did well, we got to add some of those stretch goals and embellish the book and make it even cooler. So, and yes, because I own Trekker, I own the copyright on it, so I can take those stories and do what I want with them.
And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that people can get that right now, because you've got the second collection, the second omnibus, and a Kickstarter right now going. By the time that this airs, it's going to only be a few more days until the campaign closes, but I would definitely encourage people to check it out.
Thanks. Yeah, and you can just go to by going to trekkerkickstarter.com. So
it's been it's great following on adventures. And yes, I was going to point that out. I like the fact that even though I like to start from the beginning as well, like when I first met you in, I guess, 2019 or whatever, I picked up a trade, the newest one, and fell in love with the character. And, yes, I knew that there was some stuff that was, her backstory, but it didn't feel like, I didn't feel like I was lost.
Great.
You could just jump in and have the adventure and be like, okay, this is cool. Now I'm going to make it a point to find out more.
I mean, literally, I just got tingles on my spine because when I talk to people at conventions, I tell them exactly that. I say, if I do my job right, I want somebody to be able to pick up any one of these books that they find randomly sit on a table. They read that story. They say, this is a great adventure. Clearly some cool stuff happened before this. I want to find that out. And I want to see what happens next with this character. But this story, if this is the only Trekker book somebody reads, I want them to say, not, what the hell, what was going on? I don't even get it. The story doesn't end here. I couldn't understand half of the stuff that's going on. I want people to be, I want to play fair with the audience, right? I want to give them a solid dose with each and every Trekker story. Because if I do it well enough, I don't have to hold the rest. I don't have to hold the rest of the story ransom, and you got to pay to get the rest of the story. I don't want to. I've got over 120 pages in each one of these trade paperbacks. I should be able to tell a good story in that amount of time, I feel. So, but again, you put them all together and you get that bigger tapestry. So thank you. I'm so glad it worked for you that way. That's exactly what I want.
No, absolutely. And I like the fact that it's a different kind of adventure. I mean, she's on a ice world, or she's on a desert west. It has a Western feel to it. Obviously there's the Flash Gordon elements to it, the sci-fi adventure elements to it, and the ongoing serialization. But each adventure does work as a standalone, and Mercy just kicks ass, man.
Well, thanks. Yeah, there's also my daughter years ago. She came bounding in my studio and said, "Dad, turn on the TV and watch this show Firefly, because it's a lot like Trekker." Yep, it is. There's a lot of sort of sci-fi Western shooting from the hip sort of stuff happening in that, and that's of course set on spaceships zipping around out in the stars, which is what Mercy's stories are currently doing, a lot of that. But yeah, I mean that's with each of the trade paperbacks that I do, I almost try to have it be like almost a different subgenre of science fiction. The one called Chapeltown is definitely a sci-fi Western. I mean, she goes to a dusty frontier town and she scrapes with the sheriff there. So I mean, it can't get more Western than that, right? There's one of them where she and her little group of friends are on this primitive, raw, jungly sort of moon, and there's a creature that's been created, genetically modified to become some version of a super soldier that's on the loose, but it's a monster. So it's Mercy versus the monster in the jungle. So that's like Tarzan versus some beast in the jungle, or maybe it's sort of like Predator or something. So,
I was gonna say, I got a Mercy versus Predator vibe when I read that.
yeah, and so that's a different sort of a story, right? And there's one where she gets to this space station that's sort of the heart of the rebellion against the galactic powers that be, and she's there to see if that's a way that she can help to oppose the rebellion, because she has a lot of philosophical differences with this group. But the point is that this story is more, there's a saboteur, there's somebody on that station that's trying to bring them down. And so that's more like the suspense. Can Mercy find the saboteur, reveal them, and stop them in time to save everybody on the station? So that's a whole different kind of a story, and they all fit within the broad rubric of science fiction. If you got some spaceships, and they all hang together as a Trekker story because it's all anchored to this journey, Mercy St. Clair's on. If she's a solid enough, charismatic enough, compelling enough character, I can make all these stories work, and it all fits together. I never want Trekker, despite the fact that I've been doing it for 35 years now or whatever. With sometimes there were these big breaks that we talked about in between stories, but each story should flow very organically into the next one. As Mercy evolves and changes, that should all be incremental, and the story should, because it's just too jarring. I mean, if you're reading a story and all of a sudden there's a huge shift in tone or art presentation style or whatever, it just throws me out of the story. And the whole point of this sort of storytelling to me is it should be immersive. It's like I always say about Joe Kubert, when you read a Joe story, it's like you open up and you get that splash panel, right? And he just like grabs you by your lapels and he pulls you into that story, and he will not let you go until the last panel of the last page. And if there's some huge disconnection or something in the middle of a story that throws you out of the story, that's not doing your job. So I try to keep that all smooth and flowing.
I love first page splash panels that you just open the book and they're right there, you're in it. Like, it's just, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Mike, I think he's primed and ready for the Geek Seat now that we found out, about his
Well, you've gone through his
creations.
whole career, from the beginning.
So far.
That's right.
So
next we're gonna be finding out what he had for breakfast and everything. So this should be perfect. All right, Ron, are you ready for your first question in the Geek Seat, sir?
Ron? I think so. Let's give it a try.
Sure. Okay. Ron, what was your favorite geek out moment?
Can I make it a tie for first?
Of course, this is your segment.
Okay.
This is all for you.
The first one I would have to say is that I've mentioned in the past how important it was for me when I encountered people like Al Williamson's art. I mean, that just set off all the buttons in my head or whatever. Well, then years later, I'm drawing the Star Trek comic book for a few years when Marvel had the rights to it, and I found out that my inker was going to be Al Williamson.
Whoa, wow. That's right. I remember that run.
It was they did a book called Star Trek Unlimited. It was like a double-sized book, and there would be a full-length 24 or 20 page story of the original series and a full-length story of the Next Generation. And I do the Next Generation stories, and Al Williamson inked some of those. And I had met Al once many years before when I was living in New Jersey, and I drove up with Tom Yates and a couple of other guys who knew Al, who had met Al. And so I got to meet Al in his studio, which was another big geek out moment. And he's just this great, affable guy, and then here I am, and I'm just like, I'm one of the apostles.
We're not worthy. We're not worthy. No, that's awesome.
So seeing Al Williamson ink my pencils, and I the cover of the first issue that I drew, that Al inked, that's one of the pieces of original art that I will not part with. It will not leave my hands. The other one was when a few years ago, Carl Kiesel pointed out that Katie Sackhoff, actress who played Starbuck in the revised Battlestar Galactica and is now in the Mandalorian series, but that she would be great to play Mercy St. Clair in a TV series or movie. And he was spot on about that. She's got that sense of toughness and that sort of physical danger and threat. Like you said, Mercy's a badass, and Katie has that, and she also has this incredible depth and emotional range that conveys the vulnerability underneath all of that toughness, or along with all that toughness. Anyway, and then I got to meet Katie Sackhoff at a convention a few years ago. Some friends of mine had met her and had her sign one of those personalized photographs, and it said, "To Ron, I'm your Trekker." And so that was a pretty great moment.
Wow.
Too. So I can't choose between those two.
That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
That is awesome. What was your most disappointing geek out moment, though?
I guess that would have to be and hang with me for a second on this. It was I got a call from Dark Horse Comics many years ago, asking me if I wanted to draw. They just got the rights to do Johnny Quest. Would I like to draw Johnny Quest comics for them? And the only sane response to that is hell yes. Because if you grew up when I did anyway, Johnny Quest was like, it was as good as TV got. It was an animated series, but the characters were all designed by Doug Wildey and Alex Toth, which are like the most brilliant guys working in the field. And the stories were these cool, adventures of monsters and mysteries and stuff like that. And I thought getting to draw those characters under those designs in comic books, in my medium, what could possibly be better? And it was a good experience, but the disappointment was, then I found out that they were doing the New Adventures of Johnny Quest, where the characters had been modernized or updated in their looks and stuff.
Right.
And so I wasn't able to use those Toth and Wildey designs as my absolute Bible, as my absolute sources. They were modified somewhat. It wasn't modified enough that it took all the joy out of it. And they're still great. It was still great fun to do. But still, I mean, my first thought was, I'm going to get to try to draw these Toth Wildey designs, and it wasn't quite that. So that was a blow I had to absorb.
Well, couldn't you have done, hey, all of a sudden they look just like the cartoon.
Well, we did eventually. We did have some sort of flashback moments when they were younger. So I did the best I could there.
Oh, that's cool. I could live with that. What geeks you out the most?
What geeks me out the most is probably when I see really classic sci-fi and fantasy illustration. I mean, when I see a piece by Frank Frazetta or Wally Wood, I still don't know how the hell they do it. I know I've been doing this job for a long time now. I try to develop my own craft and stuff, but some of those guys, I still look at that stuff and it's just magical to me, and which is great because I think that's what keeps any artist going, is you're just trying to get it right one goddamn time. Can I just nail it? And at least for me, I never do. I sometimes get pretty close to what I'm after, but I never hit it. It's like you're chasing your first high.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
First high was when I saw Alex Raymond drawing Flash Gordon. What? Actually, my real first high was King Comics Flash Gordon #5, drawn by Al Williamson. I saw it on the comic stand when I was a little kid. I'd never heard of Flash Gordon. I saw Flash in the title. I thought it was DC's Flash. I picked it up. I said, "This is not Flash. What is this?" I opened up the first page, and there's Flash and Dale and Zarkov wading through a swamp. It's an overhead shot, and there's like these jungly vines and alien creatures scurrying through there.
I know exactly the image you're talking about.
And I was just transported. I was immediately in the swamps of Mongo. I'd never had that kind of a, really, it was almost like an out-of-body experience. I was just thrust into that planet, that world, and then every panel was so gorgeous. And so ever since then, that's what geeks me out.
No, that's awesome. Because now I think I remember that comic also, like Mike said. And it's such a classic scene. And I found Flash Gordon the same way. Oh, wait, when is he going to start running? I can't wait to see it.
It's funny. Yeah.
That's awesome. What turns your geek off?
As much as anything, I guess it's when I hear somebody criticizing something and they're being, it's like overly obsessive on what I consider unimportant details. And it's like never let the facts get in the way of a good story. Never let the laws of science or whatever get in the way of telling a story that grips a reader and tells an emotional tale and takes them on a journey. I'm probably, I mean, if I were ever to have an astrophysicist read my comics, I would probably be in a world of hurt, because I am not an astrophysicist, and I'm just telling my sci-fi Western stories, shooting from the hip, and probably getting lots of things wrong on that level. But on the level of just trying to tell a storytelling that feels true to to the human experience, to not try to sound too, grandiose about it, but that's what matters to me. In the same way that I'm not that impressed when I see somebody do a story that has really clever plot twists and turns and intricate plotting and stuff like that. If the story has heart, that's what works for me. And sometimes people who chip away at the other things around the edges, I say, you're missing the big picture here. You're missing the core of what this thing is about. So I guess that'd be my bum out.
Oh, I totally understand. I kind of feel the same way on that one.
Yeah.
What fictional character would you like to meet the most?
Probably Mal Reynolds, the captain on Firefly.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys watch Firefly, but
Oh God, yes.
He's just a rascal, and I think having a beer with him would be one hell of a good evening. You'd have a great conversation with this guy. There's a lot of people that, there's a lot of characters, fictional characters, that I would sort of find a little bit too imposing to be around, but I think he has enough sort of self-effacing humor and just looks at the world with a little bit of an ironic stance, but he's not as bitter as he wants you to think he is. So I think he'd be a good guy to hang out with.
No, that's a great one. That is a great one. What fictional character would you not like to meet?
See, that was a tough one because there's a million of them. There's so many that are scary. The Green Goblin, I would not want to hang out with that dude. Darkseid from Kirby's from Kirby's work at DC. So there's a bunch of them. So I don't know, as far as just unsavory characters, I don't know, there's just too many to choose from. I don't have a single one to call for, I guess. Sorry to say.
No, that's good. You just don't want to walk down a dark alley and meet any of them.
That's right.
What is your favorite geek word, phrase, quote, or pose?
I got the first one that comes to mind is it's clobbering time. It's just, it's I don't know. It just maybe reveals the age I was when I was reading those comics, but seeing the big old, orange brick thing character coming out and just bellowing out, it's clobbering time. I said, well, this is going to be a fun story. Whatever happens next is going to be fun.
Especially against the Yancey Street Gang,
Yancey Street Gang, yeah. those palookas from Yancey Street, yeah.
Exactly. I love that. What is your ideal geek occupation?
If I understand the question right, it's what I'm doing right now, writing.
Number one answer right there. You got it right on the head.
Yeah.
Well, that's the great thing we love to hear is like, I'm doing it, dude. This is what I do,
Yeah.
And
I mean, it checks. I mean, just drawing comic books. It's not an easy thing to get into. It's not an easy path to take, but it's what I want to do. So that alone would be good enough, let alone being able to do it on a project that, that is such a personal one, and that I know exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing on each page and in each panel. I know the purposes. I know that it connects with readers. I know that the characters that came out of my imagination make a connection with other people. I can't really express exactly what all that means, but it's just so amazingly fulfilling. Yeah.
Wow, understandable. Awesome. Completely. I love that. What geek occupation would you not like to do though?
Boy, I one that I might get some hate mail on this, but the idea about being like an in-betweener in animation, it seems like such a thankless task to me. That's one that I thought, and I mean, and I'm not taking anything away from those people. As far as I can tell, maybe the best cartoonists in the world all seem to work in animation because they can do so much with so few lines and stuff like that. But it just seems like you're stuck in the middle of a process there. So I'm so much wanting to tell the story, that is my story, that doing a lot of the heavy lifting for somebody else would be a tricky thing to do.
Okay, no, totally understand that. Now, animation is such a tricky field anyway, and then so it's interesting. And then, a lot of the people are like, no, wouldn't want to do that part, because we actually
You
had
know,
somebody on a couple weeks ago who said, you know, I just would not want to do rotoscoping, you know. So it's
yeah, yeah. But I got to say, when I was a kid, I was really thinking at one point about, would I want to do a comic books or would I want to do animation? Because like all kids, I loved watching the Disney animated movies and stuff like that, and they're really cool. But that was the thing. I thought, well, if I do the comic books, then I'm doing all the art myself, right? And if you're animation, you're just part of a team. And I kind of held to that view. And then years later, I know it's not regarded as one of their best, most successful movies, but it was when I was watching Pocahontas of all things. But there was some beautiful animation in that movie, and I said, if I was part of a team that did this, that would be pretty cool. So I've softened on my stance on that regard. But not to say I still don't prefer doing what I'm doing.
that's awesome. That is awesome. All right, Ron, are you ready for your final question in the Geek Seat?
Yeah, I think I'm doing okay so far. Let's see if I can get out of this thing alive.
There's been a couple who've like really stalled on this question, so this is for everything. So, what is your ultimate geek fantasy?
I'm afraid this is an easy one for me too. I would love to see Trekker as a live action TV series or a series of movies. I'd love to see what would happen if my story got on the big screen. And I mean, I might cringe when I see it, but I would want to see it to know. You know what I mean? Because some creators say, "Oh, their book gets turned into a movie, or their comic gets into a movie or TV series, and it can fall down." But that would be cool to see. To see my stories, hopefully more or less preserved intact, reaching an even wider audience than I can find in the comics. Would be cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
No, totally makes sense. I fully was expecting that from you tonight. Actually,
I don't be too predictable.
I would have thought if he didn't answer that for this answer, I would have been like, I would have just thrown the script right out the window. That was it. Well, Ron, I've got some great news for you, my friend. You've made it through the Geek Seat. Congratulations. Mr. Mike Gordon, tell the young man what he's won.
You have won a lifetime subscription to the ESO network, a value easily worth $19.50. But it has been really wonderful having you join us. The Kickstarter, like I said, is live right now. If you guys are watching this within the next few days, so I are listening to this, I would strongly recommend checking that out. Just go to Kickstarter, put in Trekker. Ron, is there any website or anything else that they can use as a resource to check out what you're doing?
Well, I also have trekkercomic.com, that's that webcomic I was talking about. All the Trekker stories are posted up there. I view it as my electronic billboard. You can go there if you want to. You can just go there and read all the Trekker stories there. I'm hoping that what people will do is they'll get a taste for what I do with Trekker there, and then want to take a deeper dive and frankly, and help support me in a more material way by backing the Kickstarters and that stuff. So that would be another great place to find out more about Trekker and really see what I really want people to know about me the most, which is what I do with Trekker.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've said many times, just because Ron's met his goal doesn't mean that, he wants people to not buy the book. like if you want to get the book and a lot of these rewards and extras, like this is the time to do it. So, right. And I'm pretty sure that this probably will not be the last Kickstarter you do this year, right? My understanding?
Yeah. I mean, my goal is to do about one Kickstarter on an average of every 8 or 9 months. And since I have to write and draw the stories and get all that stuff done before I launch the Kickstarter, it keeps me pretty busy. But yeah, so once the campaign ends, and then it'll take some months because this is a hardcover and it takes a while longer to get those things printed and produced. But once those get in readers' hands, I want to have the next campaign up and ready to go by late summer, early fall. I'd love this book to be in backers' hands by August. That's what I've sort of listed as my expected delivery date or whatever they want you to do that on Kickstarter. And I'm hoping I built in enough cushion. So far, all of my campaigns have been fulfilled right on time, except for the last one, which was delayed a couple months because it was a big printing error. But yeah, I mean, I got a pretty good track record for getting things out on time. So we're going to get this next hardcover into backers' hands. And then, because the hardcovers are great. I love making them. It's like the definitive final forms of these stories. but my heart is in telling the next story. And so I've got the next one. I just can't wait to get the campaign going for that one too. So we'll get that in this year too.
Awesome. Great to hear. Well, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to close out the show.
Boom. Hey, YouTube people, thank you so much for sticking around with us. Bonus area. Ron, thank you for sticking around with us too. Do appreciate it.
Thanks very much. It was a great conversation. I loved you guys have great questions, and can't thank you enough for giving me this other chance to talk to people about Trekker.
Mike was so excited to have you on the show. It was pretty darn awesome and everything. And so it's cool. What part of Oregon are you in? Just curious.
I was born and raised in Portland, but about a year ago, my wife and I moved to the Central Oregon coast.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and it's quiet and peaceful, and a great place to make my comics and take walks on the beach, and it's pretty great. I mean, I'm in a big studio in Portland called Helioscope, and it's got a lot of great artists and some of my best friends. So I make a trip back into Portland once every month or two and spend a few days hanging out with them, working in the studio, seeing friends and family that that are still in Portland.
Sure.
So there's that. But on a day in and day out basis, this beach living kind of works well for us.
No, one of the areas we've actually talked about relocating to is either Lincoln City or even up Astoria. So
yeah, Astoria is one that when we were looking at places here, the realtor was saying, "Hey, you guys thought about Astoria?" Because it's a very cool town. I view it as more like a river town, because the town faces the mouth of the Columbia River more than the Pacific Ocean. But in fact, my wife and I were just talking about, we should take a weekend sometime and just hang out in Astoria again, because it's cool shops and restaurants and just a great vibe to that town.
Right. Because we felt like Seaside was too much of like a tourist area and everything like that.
I mean, if we could have found the right place in Seaside or Cannon Beach, because they're just like an hour and a half out of Portland, but it's much more expensive, and they're very touristy. So we're a little farther down the coast, but still within striking distance.
Yeah, because we were like looking Tillamook or Lincoln City, that area. And stuff like
that. That's great. Tillamook, you just have to beware. Sometimes it smells a lot like cows, because there's a lot of dairy farms there.
All the cheese.
But a little farther south, we're in Waldport, which is just south of Newport. Yeah, it's between Newport and Florence. Little tiny town that people you just blow right through it, because you're just trying to get to Florence or Newport.
Oh yeah,
it's
and that's the best way it could be.
Right. Well, basically, we found the house that worked for us. I figured I don't really care that much which specific town I live in on the coast. It's just finding a house that works for my wife and for me. Good room for me to have as a studio, and a nice setting and pretty close to the beach. So I got I'm just 1 block away from the beach, and
nice.
So beat that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of your studio, I'm not sure if that's where you are right now, but man, that is an impressive vinyl
album collection. Oh my god! I know, I've been drooling it since we got on the video. I was like seeing it, and it was just like, oh my god.
Yeah, when I was coming up, that's all there was is records, and I managed to hang on to most of my record collection, even moving across the country and back and forth and stuff like that. And then I converted to CDs like everybody was back in the late 1980s. But then a bunch of years ago, my son and daughter together teamed up, and for a Christmas present, they bought me a turntable, because I had I'd listen to CDs, and I had my old turntable. They bought me one of these turntables that can convert to digital, so you could plug the turntable into your computer. And they said, "Dad, this way you can play all those records, get the music on your computer, and then get rid of the records and get rid of all that stuff." And the opposite happened. I put a record on the turntable to do that, dropped the needle down. It was Springsteen's Born to Run. And and this sound came out of the speakers. And I swear to God, what I said is, "Oh yeah, that's what music is supposed to sound like."
It is. It is.
And it was like a conversion moment. And so then I had to go back and basically try to acquire the albums that I'd bought on CD that I really wanted to have on vinyl. So, which is not, at first it was the first few years, records were still kind of that I was doing this. You could still find a lot of good used records for $5, $7, $8, $10 if you could find them. But now it's like, you want to get a new record or something like that, or a new pressing of an old record to replace something. It's like 25, $35. It is not cheap. So that's what the stretch goals are for.
Oh, of course. I totally understand.
Yeah.
I totally understand. There's nothing like listening to music on an album. It's so much, it's not compressed like it is
right.
on CD or MP3. And that's what it makes it so wonderful to be able to hear. And I also love the little pops and the little hiss every once in a while.
It's more physical. It's a physical part of the environment to me, in a way that digital music just sort of feels like it's flat, and there's just depth. I mean, and it's not like I'm a big audiophile. I wasn't expecting this, but I mean, it just felt like a visceral impression. Oh yeah, there's warmth to it, and anyway, so that's what it is. One more thing, I'll just in case it's of any use, because we were talking a while ago about once you hit the funding goal, and I gave the flip answer that the stretch goals are for my records. Actually, what the stretch goals are is to provide food and electricity for my house. My initial funding target is basically to cover the cost of printing the book and shipping the book, and paying my editor. I work with an editor. Some of those ancillary expenses. It doesn't pay me for the months that it takes me to write and draw the comic book. That's what I achieve when I can with the stretch goals. Because when you run a Kickstarter and you set that funding goal, you have a choice between two different gambles you can take. You can set the funding goal for what you realistically need to make, if you're doing it as a professional, like this is my career. This is not a hobby I'm doing. So what I really need to make on a Kickstarter is all those manufacturing costs, but also the labor costs. All the time I spent writing and drawing the book and editing it and building the campaign and running the campaign, I should be paid for all that because I'm not independently wealthy. And that number is very high. And I remember when I ran my first Kickstarter for the Chapeltown book, I calculated out that my printing and shipping costs were going to be over $12,000. And I said, to be safe, I better set that target at $15,000 because the book had already been done. And I said, that way, at least I can get the book out there and not cost anything out of pocket. But if I want to make this a self-supporting venture, it's got to get a lot more than that over time. So the idea was to, do the campaigns and gradually have them build up to that. So that's where I'm about at the point now where the campaigns tend to reach the amount that puts enough money in my pocket after all those expenses to keep us in oatmeal. So that's great. That's the sort of the realistic picture of what Kickstarter funding is like for me. So the other part of that is, so the one gamble is you just set your funding target at that basic level to get it funded. Because I thought, when I launched that first campaign, I thought I might be lucky to get $7,000 or $8,000 from backers. I had no idea how many people were going to find Trekker and support on Kickstarter, And it obviously, luckily for me, it funded very quickly in about a day and a half, and then it went on to make those stretch goals and so on. But so that's the one gamble to take. You might get it funded, but not pay yourself. The other gamble, though, is to say, okay, I need $45,000 to print out this trade paperback. And if you don't hit that $45,000, as you know, Mike, you don't get a dime.
Nope.
And also, if you do hit that, because I knew some guys that run campaigns that were professional comic book artists, and they tried to build into the cost what they would make if they were doing this book for DC, or at least something in the ballpark of a professional living wage. And they either didn't make their goals, or they were sweating bullets in the last few days of the campaign, hoping to hit that target. And I said, my heart is not that strong. So rather than making that big gamble of all or nothing, for 40 or 50,000 bucks, I made the smaller gamble of, we'll get it funded first, and then we'll try to cajole the backers over the course of this campaign and other campaigns to gradually grow the audience and make it self-sustaining. And also, I've since come to realize that if you can fund it pretty quickly, you're perceived as being a winner.
Yes.
And people like to back a winner rather than back across a project out of a sense of desperation or pity. So anyway, just in case, so when you're running your next campaign or something, keep in mind those sort of questions when you even set your funding target. So
Yeah, that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I didn't realize this, and it was really interesting to find out that because I always thought that of Kickstarter as like people were only going to donate if you didn't meet your goal, right? Like once you meet your goal, people would be like, "Oh, he's met his goal. I don't need to help him out,"
Yeah,
right?
I had that fear too.
And then, but then the actual reality is, like you said, if once you meet your goal, people are like, then a lot more people come on board because they realize this book's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I had that fear too. I thought, oh, now that it's funded, then like the air is going to go out of the tires, and nobody's going on. Okay, it's a done deal. But no, I was relieved to find out that I was wrong about that. I
Yeah,
really
it gets a
was.
boost. It's like, wow, that's
Yeah,
really amazing. So,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
very
yeah.
cool.
Well, very cool. Ready to close up the show, sirs?
Let's close it up.
Okay. Thank you, YouTube folks, for listening to us talk geek out about music and geek out about Kickstarters. It's awesome. This is little bonuses we love giving to you guys. So, all right, let's close up the show then. And that's going to end another episode of the Air Station One podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Ron, thank you so much for being here and putting up with us. It was awesome.
Well, thanks, guys. It was great. I had a great time.
Do you want to promote the Kickstarter again one more time? And do you have any other conventions you're going to be at or anything?
So the Kickstarter, it's Trekker: The Complete Journey Volume 2, a big deluxe hardcover. Tells the second cycle of Mercy stories. The first Volume 1 is also available on the campaign. It's the best science fiction stories I know how to tell. And you can find it at trekkerkickstarter.com. Or you can just go to Kickstarter and either look for Trekker or me, Ron Randall, and it'll take you to that currently running campaign. You got a few more days, I guess, to back it. It ends on March 16th. I don't have any campaigns. I don't have any conventions coming up until June. I'm going to be doing one in Salem, Oregon, called the Mid Valley Con. It's kind of a new con. I think this is like just its second year, so it should be pretty cool, pretty laid back and informal. But I know some pretty cool creators are going to be there, so you might look for that one. And then I'll be doing the Rose City Convention, my hometown show that I do every year. I've been at every single one of those darn things. That's in Portland, early September. I don't remember the exact dates, but I'll be at those two for sure. Maybe more if I can line them up.
Cool. And if more funding comes in for the Kickstarter, of course.
That'd be another stretch goal. Yeah.
Of course. Come on, folks, give money so Ron can get to more conventions. And get more albums also. So there you go. Yeah. Of course. All right. And thank you, of course, Mr. Mike Gordon. Couldn't do this without you, my friend.
As always, it's my pleasure.
Anything you want to shout out about, sir?
Yeah, as we're recording this, it is March 6th, which is the birthday of Will Eisner. And in honor of Will Eisner, I know that they have a thing that I guess called Will Eisner Week, in which they encourage people to pick up and read a graphic novel. I have tried to read at least one every day this week in honor of him, and I think it's a great thing to do. This is the Will Eisner, for those people who don't know, is one of the guys who popularized the term graphic novel. He is one of the, like, if there was a monument put to independent comic creators, Will would be the guy. Like, yeah, he is. Yeah. So if you don't know Will Eisner, check out his work, his graphic novels, whether it's The Spirit, Contract with God, or many of the other ones that he did. And then there's plenty of other graphic novels to choose from. Heck, one of Ron's will do. Like, you can pick one of Ron's to read. So yeah, go out there and experience some graphic novels.
That is awesome, sir. That is awesome. Please check out, get a graphic novel for yourself. Pick it up, go to your local comic shop, or, go to Amazon or wherever you can find great, graphic novels. There's so many shops out there now that are just do purely graphic novels and everything. It's pretty awesome to check it out. It's good. It's fun to do. And, we still have some really nasty weather, certain parts of the country, and you probably have a lot of free time on your hands. So pick up a graphic novel to read and everything. It's definitely worth it. Or if you're sitting on a beach somewhere, very jealous of that, of course, please, read a graphic novel. It would be great. We'd really, really appreciate it. My shout out real quick is I had a little extra time on Saturday, so I went back and I actually binge watched the first 7 episodes of Last of Us again. And, I don't recommend binge watching this, folks. I could not sleep for half the night because I kept on looking out the window expecting to see mushroom people or something like that coming at me. And it is an amazing, amazing series, folks. If you haven't had a chance to see it or yet, please watch it. It is awesome. This next week is the season finale, and I'm just like on pins and needles about it. And I'm just like, wow, it's going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. And the acting is great. The characters are great. And you're like, oh, not another zombie show. This is not another zombie show, folks. This is nothing like The Walking Dead or stuff like that. This is an amazing, amazing thing. Heck, I might actually break down and, borrow a friend's PlayStation or something and to play the video games or anything just to try it, So that's how intense it is and how much I'm enjoying this. And I was hesitant at first. I really was. But, I actually, I had people who are non horror fans say, Mike, you've got to watch this. You've got to watch this. And folks, if the 3rd episode doesn't get nominated for an Emmy, there's not justice in the world. That's how good this show is. It is just an amazing program. So please check out, like I need to be promoting the Last of Us, nobody's watching that show. Come on, So definitely check it out, folks, and everything. It's been a great week. Things are going, and we're going to be having our Darren episode on the 13th. So please join us live when we're remembering our friend Darren Noel. It would be great for you to join us. And since we're doing live, we'll have chat. We'll be, promoting it up on Facebook and Instagram, social media. And so if you're listening to this day of, because I think this comes out on the 13th, please join us tonight and everything. So it would be great if you could do that. And as always, thanks for listening to Earth Station One. We couldn't do this without you folks. We love talking to you guys. We love talking to wonderful guests. And, Ron is always a great guy to talk to. So I really appreciate him being here tonight. And remember, if you want to leave feedback, please feedback@earthstation1.com. You can help support us also. TeePublic is the way to do that and get some really cool ESO swag. We have t-shirts, we have mugs, we have tote bags, we have pet shirts and everything. It's pretty cool stuff. Check it out. You could get to TeePublic and just look up Earth Station One or ESO Network. And for as little as $1 a week, you could also help support the ESO Network Patreon. That's how we make our money here up on the show, folks. Patreon is a great way to hear our shows early. We're coming up with new swag to give to some of our donators, and we got some great plans for our Patreon. So you too can join into that. We want to definitely do that kind of stuff. Remember, you can find Earth Station One wherever fine podcasts are found. And now Earth Station One could also be found in video format up on YouTube. We had some fun talks tonight for the YouTube folks. So definitely, if you have a chance, please check that out. Please subscribe and tell all your friends. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Can't say that enough. On behalf of myself, Mike Faber, Mr. Mike Gordon, and of course, our special guest tonight, Mr. Ron Randall, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate you. Thanks for listening. We'll see you here next time on Earth Station One. Stay safe. Hug your loved ones. Peace, and we will see you soon. Cheers. Boom. We're done. Bye, everybody.
Great job.